A very good morning to you all. You're watching World News and I'm your host, Klaudia Czerwińska. In an interview with Fox News, U.S. President Donald Trump said that Russian drones shouldn't be flying close to Polish territory, reiterating his disappointment with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Trump also criticized European members of NATO for their continued purchases of Russian oil, saying such a move would help end the war in Ukraine.
So I'm disappointed. If you listen to some people, the ones like in Poland were shot down and they fell into Polish territory, but they shouldn't have been that close anyway. They were drones. And
do you think it was a mistake? The Polish prime minister said it was not a mistake, that they were intentionally into Polish territory.
I can't comment on whether it was a mistake or not. They shouldn't have been there, let's face it. But supposedly they were disabled. When the European Union nations or the NATO nations, because they're similar, very similar, when they're buying oil from Russia, that's not the greatest thing. That's not the deal. And I let it be known, and people were surprised to hear that, but they were doing it quietly and slyly. And you can't do that. If you're going to win, you're going to have to not buy oil from Russia.
Russia bears full responsibility for the destruction caused on the night when dozens of Russian drones infringed Polish airspace, Defense Minister Władysław Kośniak-Kamysz said in Kyiv. This comes after the Polish Security Services coordinator claimed that the damage to a roof in southeastern Polish village was a result of a stray missile fired from a Polish F-16 fighter jet.
I would like this to be clear to everyone. What was behind the events from the 9th to the 10th and the partially destroyed house in Wyryki, the attack by the Russian Federation. Russian drones entered Polish territory. That is the cause. That is the reason, and they are the perpetrators. Prosecutors are investigating the details. Several hypotheses may likely be true. Each must be verified.
In the wake of Russia's drone incursion into Poland, allies want to learn about modern warfare from Ukraine after having realized how far behind they really are, said Ukrainian public figure and fundraiser Serhiy Prytula, appearing on TVP World's On the Record. Prytula is the founder of the charity foundation, which focuses on strengthening Ukraine's defense forces and providing assistance to civilians affected by Russian aggression.
The main challenge and the main goal for all of us is to substitute the human on the battlefield. That's the main reason of all what we are doing in Ukraine. In Miltech, we use different innovations. So we try to use more everything unmanned. Ground robotic systems for logistic or for medical evacuation, or UAVs, or interceptors, or FPV drones, or fiber optical FPV drones, etc., etc.
So it's to substitute shortages of manpower.
Yes, we try to substitute the soldier, exactly, do not risk with the humans' lives, because Russians, they have no value of a human's life. For Ukrainians, the human's life is priceless, and that's why we try our best to protect our soldiers and to help them to destroy plans of Kremlin to occupy all Ukraine.
The Russian drone incursion into Poland last week made everyone in the West realize how far behind Ukraine NATO is, and now everybody is rushing to Ukraine to learn the ropes.
And now let's move to Ukraine. Investors are being drawn towards the war-torn country's bonds in the wake of news that frozen Russian assets could be used to fund the fight in Kyiv.
Investors are buying up Ukraine's dollar-denominated bonds. Enthusiasm is high on the prospect that the European Union could unlock up to 170 billion euros of frozen Russian assets to fund Ukraine.
One thing is very clear. Russia, the predator, has to be held accountable for what it did and has to pay.
This could be done through so-called reparation loans, where capital raised from zero-interest bonds could be transferred to Ukraine in tranches. In another piece of good news for Ukraine, the Trump administration on Wednesday said it would pledge up to $75 million for a joint minerals fund with the country. It's part of a combined $150 million fund that will aim to rebuild Ukraine's war-torn economy while compensating Washington for its aid to the country. The announcement eased fears that U.S. President Donald Trump could be abandoning ties with Kyiv and highlighted the latter's necessity of keeping close ties with Washington.
For us, it is important as a part of our relationships with the United States. That was important for President Trump. For us, it is important to continue to cooperate with the United States under his administration.
Washington earlier this week also signed off on a new military aid package for Ukraine with deliveries of Patriot air defense missiles and HIMARS rocket launchers. With an arms package, a minerals deal, and the potential transfer of Russian assets, it's been a good week for Ukraine so far, and investors have taken notice. For TVP World, I'm Maciej Wilovski.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has visited the frontline Donetsk region, where he met with Ukrainian troops holding the line against multiple Russian offensives. Zelensky's visit to the command post of Ukraine's air assault forces in Donetsk took place on Thursday. The president discussed the progress of the counteroffensive in the region with officers on the ground. He thanked the soldiers for their commitment and presented them with state awards. Upon the visit, Zelenskyy announced the Ukrainian army had taken 160 square kilometers of territory and liberated 7 more settlements. He failed to mention when Ukraine made those gains, but announced that the counteroffensive was not over and that Russia had suffered huge losses. A bold plan in the Czech Republic to arm Ukraine with millions of artillery shells is under fire. Populist opposition leader and current election frontrunner Andrej Babiš says he'll scrap the plan if he wins the next month's elections. As Alexandra Bulenda reports, that puts Ukraine's ambitious defense efforts on the line.
The Czech-led ammunition initiative has been one of Europe's most innovative ways to help Ukraine hold the line against Russia. And Prague secured more than 1 million artillery shells this year alone, plugging the gap left when Washington stalled on weapon deliveries. But now, mind you, just weeks before a decisive election, then the plan faces its sharpest attack yet. Andrej Babiš, the billionaire former prime minister and frontrunner in October's vote, calls the share program, quote, rotten. He insists taxpayer money should go to the Czechs, not Ukraine's battlefield. If he returns to power, he promises to scrap the effort altogether.
It is rotten. Why would we continue with that? We need money for our people.
Why pull the plug on an initiative that made Prague a leader in European security? We put that question to a former defense ministry official.
As a leader of a catch-all party, he's trying to gather votes from all parts of the political spectrum, including the more extreme parts of the spectrum, and that for him means he has to toughen up his rhetoric.
The numbers show why his words resonate. A June survey by STEM found that 49% of Czechs think their country is already giving Ukraine too much. Only 29% said support was about right, while just 6% wanted more. For industry, the stakes are high. The Czechoslovak Group, one of Europe's largest private defense suppliers to Ukraine, has been deeply entwined with Kyiv efforts.
A lot of our deliveries to Ukraine are from Slovakia. And despite various proclamations of Slovak government, the fact is that defense export from Slovakia to Ukraine is at the highest level ever.
On the government side, contributions have remained massive until now. Last year, the Czech coordinated shell drive delivered 1.5 million rounds of heavy ammunition, funded by 14 allied states. This year, the target is 1.8 million shells. But politics could yet derail it all, with ANO polling at 32% against just 21% for Prime Minister Fiala's coalition. Babiš is seizing on public fatigue to attack the shell drive. If he follows through, Ukraine will now have to look elsewhere, and Europe will once again be tested on whether words of solidarity match the real firepower. A strategy old as the war itself. Turn the battlefield into the ballot box. From Prague for TVP World, I'm Alexandra Bulenda.
Lithuanian prosecutors have filed terrorism charges against 15 people over attacks using packages with explosives in Germany, Poland and the UK last summer. Authorities say the plot was coordinated by Russian nationals with ties to Moscow's intelligence service.
The multinational group, which includes Russian, Lithuanian, Latvian, Estonian and Ukrainian citizens, is accused of using delivery firms to ship massage pillows rigged with hidden explosives. The devices sparked fires in Germany, Poland and the UK. Prosecutors said the suspects operated in a highly organized manner, dividing tasks such as transporting incendiary materials, hiding caches and assembling bombs. An investigation by Baltic and Russian exiled media traced the operation back to contacts of a former Soviet submarine commander, with links to a St. Petersburg businessman accused of helping Russian companies dodge sanctions. Lithuania has issued international arrest warrants for several suspects, including the alleged coordinator, 37-year-old Russian national Yaroslav Mikhailov. 2 suspects have already been detained in Estonia in connection with the IKEA arson in Vilnius last year.
Liberal Budapest Mayor Gergely Karácsony joined TVP World on Wednesday following his speech at this year's Budapest Forum for Building Sustainable Democracies conference. Once known for calling Budapest an island of freedom in a land ruled by Viktor Orbán's Fidesz government, Karácsony said that he has stopped using the phrase, arguing that it only deepens the kind of polarization that fuels populism.
Yes, it's a very difficult and complicated situation to live up to one's own values and stand up for them without exacerbating the polarization that exists within the country and that leads to populism. In my opinion, this is the most important starting point. That's why I don't view Budapest as being opposed to or different from the rest of the country, but rather as the nation's capital, which is bringing Hungary back into Europe. This issue is perhaps even more acute in Hungary than in Poland, where there are other large cities besides Warsaw. Hungary has one truly large city, Budapest, where 17% of the population lives, and for this reason, the conflict between the big city and the countryside is perhaps even more pronounced here than in Poland.
The United States has yet again vetoed a draft United Nations Security Council resolution which demanded an immediate, unconditional and permanent ceasefire in Gaza. The document also called for release of all captives held by Hamas as well as for lifting of restrictions on humanitarian aid into Gaza.
This draft resolution represents the bare minimum that humanity, legality and morality dictate. It is deeply regrettable and painful that it has been blocked, preventing the Security Council from playing its rightful role in the face of these atrocities and to protect civilians in the face of genocide.
We would like to thank the United States for showing leadership and moral conviction by vetoing this biased resolution.
Protesters took to the streets of France to oppose budget cuts set out by the outgoing government of François Bayrou. As part of the nationwide protests, various groups called for a wealth tax and increased spending on public services.
French unions called for a day of nationwide protests to oppose the budget principles set out by the outgoing Prime Minister. Teachers, train drivers and hospital staff alike urged President Emmanuel Macron and Le Cornu to scrap Bayrou's budget cuts. Demands included a higher tax for the rich, more spending on public services, and reversing a change that requires people to work longer to receive a pension. Bayrou was ousted last week for a €44 billion budget squeeze plan.
A world-renowned author and mastermind behind the Da Vinci Code, Dan Brown, visited Prague, which serves as the setting of his latest book titled The Secret of Secrets.
World-renowned author and mastermind behind the Da Vinci Code, Dan Brown, has visited Prague, which serves as the setting of his latest book, titled The Secret of Secrets. Speaking to journalists on Thursday in the Czech capital, Dan Brown talked about what it is he hopes to evoke in readers of his new novel. The Secret of Secrets is a mystery thriller and the 6th installment of his Robert Langdon series.
I really hope to spark dialogue and curiosity on this topic of consciousness, on the science of consciousness, on the mysteries of Prague, on the beauty of Prague, So I think it's important, really primarily, to remind ourselves just how much we can learn from books and just how much fun it can be to run through a book.
This latest installment of Professor Robert Langdon's adventures will take him and readers across Prague to locations like the Prague Castle, the city's old town, Charles Bridge, and other Prague highlights, including the old Jewish cemetery.
And so this would be all the latest news for now. Thank you very much for joining. I'm Karga Czerwińska, and I hope to see you back here on TVP World in just a moment.